cop slapped a black woman in court. Seconds later, she took the judge's seat. You and other filthy creatures belong in cages, not courtrooms. Officer Martinez would be plagued by those remarks for the rest of his life. Before we continue, I want to invite you to like the video and leave a comment from where you are watching this story. Wearing civilian clothing and carrying a briefcase filled with the case files for the day, Judge Keisha Williams made her way to the courthouse. One more ghetto rat attempting to enter covertly, Martinez obstructed her way, glaring down at her with utter disdain. Her head snapped sideways as his outstretched palm smashed so forcefully into her face. Legal papers scattered like confetti on the courthouse steps when the pricey briefcase slipped out of her hands. Martinez slammed her back against the stone wall and seized her by the throat. You and other filthy creatures belong in cages, not courtrooms. Metal handcuffs cut onto her wrists as he wrenched her arms behind her back. Around them, other officers were giggling and filming on their phones. Despite the pain in her jaw, Keisha's gaze remained fixed on the bronze plaque over the courthouse entrance. The very system she served was brutalizing the Honorable Judge K. Williams, who was presiding 20 feet from her own courtroom. Have you ever witnessed such harsh, quick karma? Martinez cleared his throat and fixed his clothing inside the courthouse. He had performed this dance numerous times before, controlling the narrative, spinning the tale, and making himself the hero. Particularly when those perpetrators resembled her, the system consistently gave cops the benefit of the doubt. "Your Honor," Martinez said in a steady, well-practiced voice, "I came across a suspicious person trying to get past courthouse security as I was carrying out standard security procedures." He pointed to Keisha, who was now seated at the defendant's table in handcuffs, with a purple bruise growing over her left face. When asked to follow conventional security protocols, the defendant became more agitated and began acting strangely, refusing to produce identification. Judge Harrison, a slender, pallid guy in his 60s who served as the interim judge, nodded his approval. "And Officer Martinez, what specifically did you notice?" "Well, sir, she was carrying what looked like stolen legal documents and was not suitably attired for judicial proceedings." Martinez warmed to his fabrication, his eyes gleaming. "She became verbally hostile, threatening me and using foul language when I went to look into it." Rodriguez and Thompson, two additional officers, exchanged knowing glances from the gallery, numerous times. They had listened to Martinez narrate the same stories with various faces and the same script. Martinez went on in a tone brimming with contempt. She kept screaming about being someone important. These individuals always pretend to be senators, judges, attorneys, or anything else to evade responsibility. "Your Honor, I've seen this playbook before." Judge Harrison was obviously involved as he leaned forward. "Did she fight arrest or try to escape?" "Of course. When I tried to place the defendant in protective custody, she became violent. In order to protect the public, I had to use the least amount of force required." The only flaw in Martinez's flawless performance was the slight trembling of his hand while he talked. Every untruth was recorded for future generations by the courthouse stenographer's fingers as they moved across her machine. A young law clerk in the back row scowled, recalling something, and the prosecutor called, "Officer Rodriguez, could you vouch for Officer Martinez's account?" Rodriguez stood, immaculately ironed in his uniform. "Yes, ma'am. I was present for the whole thing. It was obvious that the defendant was trying to get around security measures. Officer Martinez was quite professional in his handling of the matter." Judge Harrison asked about the alleged attack. Martinez's mouth clenched. "Your Honor, I subdued a violent person who was endangering the security of the courthouse using only the required force. If the defendant was hurt, it was because she disobeyed legal orders." Taking out his phone, he swiped to a video that had coincidentally begun in the middle of the argument. Unfortunately, My body cam broke this morning, so I just have a portion of the film here. Like honey, the untruth slipped from his lips. Speaking for the first time, Keisha muttered, "Odrukis, how convenient." I apologize. Judge Harrison's eyebrows went up. Her eyes burned with controlled rage, but she calmly replied, "Nothing, Your Honor." Martinez's act went on. This is a classic example of someone who has been caught breaching the law, playing the victim. She was carrying dubious documents while trespassing on government grounds, and she instantly accused someone of prejudice when her illegal actions were discovered. Sandra Walsh, the middle-aged prosecutor, gave a sympathetic nod. "Officer Martinez, have you faced comparable circumstances in your 15 years of service?" Regretfully, the answer is yes. This exhibits a pattern. Some people think they are above the law and are exempt from the regulations. They divert attention from their own illegal actions by making racist charges. Righteous wrath erupted in Martinez's voice. To the actual victims of discrimination, it is genuinely offensive. A few of the gallery's patrons, primarily white courthouse staff, nodded in accord. They had seen similar storylines unfold on social media and heard similar news stories. It was pleasant, even familiar. Martinez mockingly created air quotes about the defendant's assertion that she was heading to work. However, she was unable to produce identity, proof of work, or a valid justification for her presence in a restricted section of the courthouse. The third officer, Thompson, came forward. The defendant was carrying what looked to be private legal paperwork, if I may add, Your Honor. We believe she might have been a part of a fraud or identity theft plot. Judge Harrison had a curious expression. "A fraud scheme." "Indeed, sir." Martinez sensed momentum and jumped back in. These documents contained confidential information, case numbers, and judicial letterhead. Such materials would not be available to any lawful citizen. "We think she might have been preparing to pose as a court employee." The irony was nearly oppressive in its thickness. Martinez, however, continued without seeing the trap he was creating for himself. He came to the professional conclusion that this is just another instance of someone attempting to circumvent the system. She is aware that she may divert attention from her real misdeeds if she can make this about race and alleged police brutality. The public's sympathy is being purposefully manipulated. His eyes were chilly and disdainful as he turned to face Keisha. These individuals believe they can simply go into any courtroom, building, or other location they like. They yell discrimination when they are halted. "Not in my courthouse anyway." Like a toxic cloud, the words lingered in the atmosphere. While some court employees shuffled uneasily, others maintained their composure. "The state advises that we move forward with charges of assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and trespassing." "Your Honor," Prosecutor Walsh said, "it is obvious that the defendant is using a desperate defense tactic by attempting to portray this as a civil rights problem." Martinez smiled a little to himself. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Another case, another victory, another confirmation that the system was operating as intended. People either learnt their place the hard way or knew it. Moreover, encouraged by the encouraging environment, I would like to stress that I exhibited extraordinary self-control, he added. The defendant was obviously unstable and may have been under the influence of drugs. Much more force could have been employed by a less experienced cop. Judge Harrison gave a somber nod. "We appreciate your professionalism, Officer Martinez." Despite the shackles, Keisha remained motionless in the defendant's chair. Her hands folded in her lap, her face stayed composed, even placid. However, the little upturn at the corners of her mouth would have been visible to anyone paying careful attention. She was mentally recording every falsehood, fabrication, and detail that would eventually cause Martinez's reputation and career to fall apart. The cop was testifying in front of the guy who could destroy him, but he was unaware of it. "Do you want to say anything more, officer?" Judge Harrison inquired, Martinez's shoulders erect. "Events like as these serve as a reminder of the need for robust law enforcement. Authority only makes sense to some individuals when it is supported by force. Today, the defendant discovered that decisions have repercussions. He was unaware of the prophetic nature of such words." The prosecutor grinned with assurance. "Your Honor, the state rests its case against this defendant. The evidence unequivocally demonstrates a pattern of illegal activity and defiance of legitimate authorities." One last time, Keisha looked at Martinez as he left the witness stand. He gave her a wink, a sign of total control and triumph. It would be his final triumphant moment in his career. Judge Harrison declared that the defendant might now make her statement, implying that this would only be a formality prior to punishment. The handcuffs clinked softly as Keisha Williams carefully got out of her chair. She handled herself with an unmistakable dignity that caused several people in the courtroom to shift uneasily, despite the purple bruising on her cheek and the unkempt appearance of her clothing. "Your Honor, thank you." Her power appeared to permeate the entire room, and her voice was clear and well-controlled. "I'm grateful for the chance to respond to these accusations." Judge Harrison blinked. Her tone had a surprising, business-like quality that contrasted with the story he had been told. "I want to start by correcting a few factual errors in Officer Martinez's testimony." Keisha systematically looked across the courtroom, focusing on everyone who had backed up the officer's falsehoods. "He said that I had trespassed on government property, but at around 8:47 a.m., I was approaching the courthouse's main door on a public walkway." She swiveled slightly and spoke straight at Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, you are undoubtedly aware of the Supreme Court's decision in Hague-Vifus Committee for Industrial Organization, which unequivocally states that sidewalks in front of government buildings are conventional public spaces where people are entitled by the Constitution to be present." Mid-stroke, the stenographer's fingers hesitated. The prosecutor scowled. They had not anticipated such a rambling, passionate outpouring from someone facing serious charges. Additionally, Officer Martinez testified that I was carrying suspicious paperwork and implied that I was implicated in identity theft. Keisha added, "I want to take a closer look at that assertion." She pointed to the table of evidence where her jumbled papers had been gathered. "It is true that the documents are genuine legal documents. They consist of administrative communication, court memoranda and pending case files, all of which I am legally permitted to examine in my role as a professional." "In my professional capacity," Judge Harrison said. "And what do you do for a living, miss?" A little smile played at the corners of Keisha's mouth as she stopped. "Williams, Dr. Williams, and I believe we will soon discuss my work history at your honor." A shiver went down Martinez's back. There was a serious problem with this image. "Permit me to continue." "Your honor," Keisha responded. Her voice became the rhythm of someone who was totally at ease in a courtroom. "Additionally, according to Officer Martinez's testimony, I started using foul language and became vocally hostile. In order to respond to that allegation, I would like to assert my Fifth Amendment right to silence with relation to any remarks I could have made at the time of the alleged occurrence." She took a moment to process that. "I should point out, though, that any remarks I did make were in immediate reaction to being physically abused without notice, provocation, or legal basis." Sitting up straighter was the young law clerk in the back row. This woman's voice and demeanor seemed familiar in some way. There was suddenly steel in Keisha's voice as she went on to address the officer's assertion that his body cam had malfunctioned. The federal rules of evidence, especially Rule 1006, which permits the insertion of summaries of extensive records, are undoubtedly well known to you, Your Honor. I have reason to assume that this court will have access to extensive audio and video evidence of the incident that occurred this morning. Judge Harrison bent over. Which type of evidence are you talking about? Your Honor, the main approach of this courthouse is lined with high-definition cameras spaced 15 feet apart, providing comprehensive security video surveillance. Regardless of alleged technology failures, the county also has automated backup systems for every officer body cam recordings. In Martinez's face, the color faded. In his haste to steer the story, he had overlooked the surveillance cameras in the courthouse. I would like to formally request that this court issue a preservation order for all electronic surveillance data from this morning between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m., Keisha added. This includes, but is not limited to, body cam backup files, courthouse security footage, and any mobile phone recordings that may have been made by officers on the scene. Prosecutor Walsh suddenly stood up. Your Honor, I object. Without adequate legal counsel, the defendant cannot just make demands for evidence. The woman took an uncontrollably backward step as Keisha turned to face the prosecution. According to the Sixth Amendment, pro se defendants are entitled to introduce evidence in support of their own defense. Your Honor, Brady v. Maryland also creates the prosecution's duty to protect potentially exonerating evidence. It was deafeningly quiet in the courtroom. These cases did not typically proceed like this. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. You appear to know a great deal about the judicial system, Miss Williams. Are you formally trained in law? Your Honor, I have some experience in the legal system. Keisha's eyes glowed with what appeared to be amusement. But her answer was deliberately neutral. She made her way to the evidence table, as far as the handcuffs would permit, and pointed to her strewn-about possessions. I also want to address Officer Martinez's description of my presence here as unapproved or suspicious, Your Honor. She indicated a certain document among the pile of papers. My daily court calendar indicates that I was supposed to rule over the case. I apologize. I was supposed to be at this facility starting at 9 this morning for official business. Henderson, a big man who had been a bailiff in this courthouse for 12 years, fell suddenly extremely motionless. He was looking at Keisha with increasing fear and recognition. I claim to be someone significant, Officer Martinez testified. Keisha added, I want to make it clear that I never said anything like that when we met. I did try to show him my identification, though, and he wouldn't look it over before attacking. She stopped and looked around the courtroom. Despite Officer Martinez's aggressive interference, I have documents in my hands, Your Honor, that will prove my identity and my justification for being at this courthouse this morning. Judge Harrison was starting to appear noticeably uneasy. What sort of records? Keisha took her time reaching into her jacket pocket so as not to startle anyone. My official identification, my building access card that is programmed with the entry code to my judicial chamber, and my judicial parking pass that was provided by the administrative office of this courtroom. Henderson, the bailiff, rose abruptly. His face whitened as he recognized the woman he had seen daily for the last 3 years. I think there has been a serious miscommunication over the identity of the person that Officer Martinez assaulted this morning, Your Honor, Keisha remarked quietly. The gold court seal was evident even from the other side of the room when she held up a pocketbook containing leather credentials. With the distinct tone of someone accustomed to delivering rather than receiving commands in courtrooms, she advised that perhaps we should take a break so that appropriate identifications could be confirmed. Judge Harrison gazed first at Keisha's face and then at the credential wallet. The bailiff, who was grimly nodding, then, he stated hoarsely, "The court will be on recess for 15 minutes." Martinez felt his entire life coming apart as the gavel landed. He was starting to realize that he might not even be aware of the rules of the game he believed he was playing. The courthouse was alive with anxious activity during the 15-minute break. Keisha sat quietly in a little holding room next to the courthouse as Bailiff Henderson fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking as the situation's gravity set in. "Judge Williams," he muttered in a horrified tone. "Judge Williams, I'm so sorry, Jesus Christ. When they brought you in like that, I didn't recognize you in civilian clothing." "Don't worry, Henderson," Keisha said quietly. "I need you to help me, although you weren't involved in this. Anything at all, Your Honor. Please fetch me my judicial robes and proceed silently to my chambers. Henderson and the black ones with the gold trim." She gave him a straight gaze. "Don't forget to bring my gavel, the one that was inscribed during my swearing-in ceremony." Henderson gave a forceful nod and rushed off, leaving Keisha to think alone. After 23 years on the bench, she had learned to calm herself by closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. Judge Keisha Williams, a renowned jurist, defender of constitutional rights, and defender of justice, had served this morning. Within 15 minutes, she was a victim, a defendant. A handcuffed lady with trumped-up charges against her. It was time to take back what was rightfully hers. Her phone buzzed with missed calls and messages after being seized during the arrest and then returned. Janet Morrison, her clerk, had been texting more and more anxiously. "Judge Williams, are you somewhere? In half an hour, the Peterson hearing will begin. The lawyers are here to inquire about delays. Your Honor, call me back. Judge Williams." "Rumor has it that something occurred." Keisha swiftly typed back. "Inform the Peterson lawyers that we will reschedule. A more significant issue has arisen. Please clear my afternoon schedule." She discovered the number she was looking for by scrolling through her contacts. The administrative leader of the entire judicial district is Chief Judge Margaret Carter. "Keisha, it's Margaret. Thank God. Keisha, we were informed of an event of some sort. Are you okay?" "I've improved." "Margaret, I'm in need of your assistance, and at this moment I need you to execute it without question. Whatever you need, of course. Kindly get in touch with the courthouse security office and instruct them to promptly preserve and duplicate all of the CCTV footage that was captured between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m. this morning. Every perspective, every camera. Additionally, Margaret, ensure that several copies are kept in various places." A pause occurred. "What occurred this morning?" "Keisha Martinez, a police officer, just gave an hour-long under-oath testimony about how he bravely stopped a dangerous criminal from trespassing on judicial premises." Chief Judge Carter had never heard Keisha's voice before, but it had a sharp edge. "And it was me, Margaret, the dangerous criminal. He did more than simply arrest me on my way to work. In front of this courthouse, he attacked me, called me a dirty animal, and said I should be put in a cage." The other end of the telephone was silent for about 30 seconds. "Keisha, Jesus Christ, what are you in need of? Do I need to contact the FBI, the Office of the Attorney General?" "Not quite yet. I need you to make some phone calls and secure those surveillance tapes right now. I want all of the cases in which Officer Martinez has testified over the last 5 years to be pulled and examined. Think of it as finished. You can't manage this case on your own. Keisha, I'm going to return to that courtroom in my judicial robes in about 10 minutes, Margaret, and there's a conflict of interest. This morning, Officer Martinez will find out exactly who he assaulted and, more crucially, who can make sure he is held accountable for his conduct." Henderson came back with a little wooden box and a garment bag. "Your Honor's robes, your gavel, and Obi's." The flowing black judicial robes that had served as her armor for more than 20 years were exposed when Keisha stood up and unzipped the garment bag. She could feel the change starting as soon as she put them on. Each fold of the cloth, which rested on her shoulders like a mantle of authority, served as a reminder of her authority, her oaths, and the justice she had vowed to uphold. With a familiar and reassuring weight in her fingers, she took out her ceremonial gavel after opening the wooden box. The words, "Justice is blind, but she sees all," were engraved on its handle. She adjusted her robes and said, "Henderson, I want you to properly notify me when we get back to that courthouse. Indeed, Your Honor. What is your preferred method of announcement?" After 23 years as a federal judge, Keisha Williams straightened to her full height. Keisha Williams, the honorable judge, is presiding. She examined herself in the wall-mounted little mirror. She could still see the bruise on her cheek, but it had a new function. It served as a reminder of the system's collapse, as well as proof of Martinez's violence, and how fully it was going to be fixed. Officer Martinez will discover the true meaning of justice when court resumes. Everyone gets up. Everyone in the courtroom jerked to attention as Henderson's voice boomed through it with power. However, what transpired next would be permanently etched in their recollections. The court is now in session. Keisha Williams, the honorable judge, is presiding. Like a thunderbolt, the words struck the courtroom. Officer Martinez became rigid after resting idly against the prosecutor's table. Judge Harrison became white as death, still sitting in what he now knew was not his chair. The prosecutor's jaw dropped, wearing her full judicial robes. With the gold trim gleaming in the overhead lights, Keisha Williams approached the judge's chamber through the entrance. She paced herself as if she had been on this route dozens of times before. She held her ceremonial gavel in her right hand. There was complete quiet. Nobody was brave enough to breathe. She positioned herself behind her bench and sat down gently and methodically. She looked around the courtroom, observing every stunned expression, every lowered jaw, and everyone who was finally starting to realize the full impact of what had just transpired. With a voice full of judicial authority, she murmured softly, "Officer Martinez, you can stay upright." Martinez appeared on the verge of throwing up. In 30 seconds, his face had changed from red to white to green. "I didn't, Your Honor." Judge Harrison stumbled as he got up from his seat. Keisha interrupted me to say, "Thank you for running my courtroom during my unexpected delay." "Judge Harrison." Her tone was sharp, but not rude. "Feel free to go back to your own docket. I'll take care of this from here." Harrison's robes billowed behind him like he was being pursued by demons as he virtually raced out of the courtroom. Keisha returned her focus to Martinez, who was now clearly trembling. "Officer Martinez, do you remember your testimony that you gave under oath in this courtroom about 2 hours ago?" I, Martinez, was unable to compose words. "Allow me to remind you," Keisha went on, "these individuals always pretend to be attorneys, judges, senators, or anything else to evade responsibility, as you said. And I quote, remember what you said?" Martinez gave a feeble nod. "You added that you had previously read a remark from this playbook and that I was cited as just another entitled activist seeking financial gain. Is that correct? Perhaps most notably." Keisha's voice became progressively colder as the courtroom became so silent that the sound of the air conditioners sounded like a roar. "You said that individuals like me must understand that, quote, decisions have repercussions. Remember that specific nugget of wisdom." Martinez could hardly stand due to the intense shaking in his legs. Keisha pulled a tablet computer from behind her bench. "I want to show you some proof that I recently discovered, Officer Martinez." Her eyes shifted to the courtroom on the tablet screen. It contained pristine security camera footage from the courtroom steps that captured the whole morning's events from a variety of perspectives. This video was captured by the 7th security camera in the courthouse, which provides an unhindered view of the main entrance. The video began when her finger touched the screen. As the events played out on screen, the courtroom watched in terror. Keisha was there, wearing civilian clothing and strolling quietly in the direction of the courthouse. Martinez was standing in her way. Then there was another ghetto rat attempting to enter covertly. Through the tablet speakers, Martinez's voice could be heard well across the courtroom. There were several audible gasps. The footage went on, vividly capturing Martinez's unjustified attack, the vicious hold on Keisha's throat, the shackles, and the smack that caused her head to snap backward. But that was not yet the most incriminating moment. You and other filthy creatures belong in cages, not courtrooms. His courtroom reverberated with the bitterness and contempt of Martinez's own remarks. In other instances, a number of jurors who had been waiting in the gallery got up and left in disgust. Keisha paused the recording and said, "Officer Martinez, does the defendant appear to be verbally aggressive in this video? Any foul language? Are there any threats?" Martinez said nothing as his career fell apart in front of him. "Let's look at your assertion that your body cam malfunctioned now," Keisha added. She made a swipe to a fresh video clip. "Every 60 seconds, this backup video from your personal body camera is automatically transferred to the county's cloud storage system. You seem to have forgotten about this system." Martinez's voice filled the courtroom once more as the next video started to play. But this time, it was far worse. It was the full, unaltered version. "Take a look at this petty bitch who believes she can enter my courthouse." Through the speakers came the growl of Martinez's voice. "These folks must understand their role. It's time for another lesson." Sandra Walsh, the prosecutor, was hastily gathering her documents in an attempt to disassociate herself from the tragedy that was taking on in front of her. Keisha wasn't done, though. She yelled, "Officer Thompson, Officer Rodriguez, both of you stated under oath that Officer Martinez was quite professional in his handling of the matter. Do you want those statements to be changed?" Already, both officers were moving in the direction of the exit. "And now," Keisha stated, "we can see the time when Officer Martinez committed felony violence against a federal judge as the film advances to depict the assault from his own body cam perspective." For a minute, she allowed the words to linger. "Judge, federal." Martinez's knees went to the ground. To prevent himself from falling, he clung on the prosecutor's table. Keisha responded, "But wait," in a tone that was almost conversational. "There's more." On her tablet, she opened a new file. This is the sound recording from Officer Thompson's body camera, which seemed to be operating flawlessly this morning. The courtroom was filled with a fresh voice. While Martinez was attacking Keisha, Thompson's voice was heard talking to Rodriguez. "This one is definitely getting to the man. Do you really believe that she is as significant as she claims to be?" In response, Rodriguez said, "Look at her, nah, man. Martinez is an expert in his field. Just another welfare queen attempting to con the system, most likely." The officers continued to giggle as they witnessed their colleague abuse a federal judge. Martinez was being looked at with undisguised disgust by the few people who were still in the gallery. Keisha put down her tablet and said, "Officer Martinez, I was asked before if I had any proof of work." "Yes, I do." She pointed to her nameplate, the oil painting of her hanging in the courthouse entrance, and the judicial seal affixed to the wall behind her bench. "Officer Martinez, I've served as this courthouse's presiding judge for 23 years. I've had jurisdiction over every case you've ever testified in, every warrant you've ever asked for, and every search you've ever carried out in this jurisdiction." At last, Martinez managed to speak, although it was hardly more than a whisper. "I was ignorant, Your Honor." Slowly, Keisha said, "You didn't know. You didn't care to look. Therefore, you were unaware. You assumed something about a black woman you saw. You chose to misuse your power after seeing someone you believed to be helpless. She leaned a little forward. However, Officer Martinez, you were unaware of another fact. The courtroom remained silent. Working together with the FBI's Civil Rights Division, I've been investigating racial bias and misbehavior tendencies in this police department for the past 6 months. Martinez's expression turned white. Officer Martinez, the occurrence this morning wasn't a coincidence. You've been the subject of an investigation, and you just gave us the best proof we could ask for. She held her gavel in front of her and raised it. You mentioned that actions have repercussions, Officer Martinez. You were correct. While I think on the proper charges, the court will adjourn. There was a thunderclap when the gavel fell. Martinez fell into a chair, his reputation, his profession, and perhaps even his freedom now in jeopardy. The mood had drastically changed by the time court started 20 minutes later. Like wildfire, word had swept around the courthouse. Rumors of the most stunning courtroom reversal in the building's history had brought lawyers, clerks, bailiffs, and court reporters into the gallery in silence. Martinez sat slouched in the chair that was obviously the defendant's. His face was pale, and his clothes was crumpled. His lawyer, Michael Carter, a tense public defender who had been called in a hurry, kept glancing at his client with concern. Every eye in the room now viewed Judge Keisha Williams differently, yet she returned to her bench with the same composed dignity that she had shown thousands of times before. This judge wasn't your average one. The man who was now shaking in front of her bench had viciously attacked this woman. "Officer Martinez," she said. She spoke with the full force of 23 years of judicial experience. "I think this court and everyone in attendance should know exactly who you assaulted this morning before we move forward with the significant criminal accusations you now face." She got up and walked around the bench to speak directly to the crowded courtroom. "Judge Keisha Williams is my name. I have been this courthouse's presiding judge for 23 years. Governor Richardson appointed me to this post in 2001, and the state Senate unanimously approved my appointment. With every word—" Her voice got louder. "As the editor of the Harvard Law Review, I received a magna cum laude degree from Harvard Law School. I worked as a federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division for 8 years prior to being appointed to the bench." Martinez's lawyer was scrawling notes furiously, presumably figuring out how many years his client was facing. "I focused on cases involving institutional racism, human rights abuses, and police misconduct throughout my time as a federal prosecutor. 47 cases against law enforcement officials who misused their power were successfully prosecuted by me." She took a moment to process that figure. "I have ruled over 15,000 cases in my 23 years on this bench. I've given sentences to hundreds of defendants, ranging from murderers to small-time criminals. I have witnessed every kind of illegal activity, along with every defense and rationalization." Martinez sat frightened as Judge Williams approached. "However, in my years of service, Officer Martinez, I have never once come across a more glaring illustration of all the issues with American policing." The only sound in the crowded courtroom was Martinez's ragged breathing. "You see, Officer Martinez, you weren't just attacking a random person when you called me a filthy animal and a ghetto rat, said I should be kept in a cage, and smashed me against the wall of my own courthouse." She went back to standing behind the bench. "You were attacking someone who has devoted her professional life to making sure that police officers like you are held responsible for their conduct." On her bench was a hefty file, which Judge Williams opened. "Every case in which you have testified during the previous 5 years is documented in detail in this file. Officer Martinez, 43 cases. You've sworn to tell the truth 43 times in my courtroom." She turned a few pages over. "In 28 of the cases, defendants were people of color. You were the arresting officer in 26 of the cases. And you used terminology that was strikingly similar to what you used with me this morning to describe the defendants in each and every one of them. Officer Martinez. Martinez's face had turned grey instead of white, and he was acting strangely, defying orders and acting aggressively, endangering the safety of the officers. Again and again, the same lies. The same story, the same words. With a snap, Judge Williams shut the file. But Officer Martinez, here's something you are unaware of. I've been collaborating with the Force of Justice, the State Attorney General's Office, and the FBI's Civil Rights Division for the last 6 months to look into systematic instances of racial bias and misbehavior in this police force. The public defender ceased writing and just gazed at his client with a look that bordered on sympathy. There is a federal watch list that includes your name, Officer Martinez. They've been watching you. We have been keeping an eye on your communications. Analysis has been done on your arrest patterns. She leaned a little forward. And you gave us the best, clearest, indisputable proof of criminal civil rights abuses any prosecution could ask for this morning. Officer Martinez. The judge raised her gavel. While a federal judge was carrying out her official duties, you attacked her. It is clear from your own recorded admissions that you did it out of racial animosity. Then you lied under oath about what happened during that assault, which is perjury. The gavel was in midair. You asked me this morning, Officer Martinez, if I knew where I belonged. I'll tell you exactly where I am. The courtroom was filled with the gentle authority of her voice. Making sure that justice is done is my role on this bench in this courtroom. Holding individuals like you responsible when you misuse the authority we have given you is my job. Once the gavel fell. Officer Martinez, my place, is working to ensure that the racist violence you committed on me this morning is the last time you ever act in that capacity as a police officer. For the first time, Martinez got it. He hadn't attacked a woman at random. Justice itself has been attacked by him. Justice was on the verge of retaliating. Judge Williams opened a large manila folder and said, Officer Martinez, let's take a look at your illustrious law enforcement career. Although Martinez appeared immobile and unable to react to anything going on around him, his lawyer reached over to whisper urgently in his client's ear, Internal affairs data show that over your 15-year tenure, you have been the target of 47 formal complaints. Officer Martinez, 47 complaints. That amounts to over 3 complaints annually on average. She produced a document and raised it. Let's begin with the first complaint, which was submitted in 2009, when Mrs. Rosa Delgado, a 63-year-old grandmother, inquired for your badge number during a routine traffic check. You allegedly called her a spick and pushed her face against her car hood. Uncomfortably, the crowded courtroom stirred. The investigation conducted by your agency determined that Mrs. Delgado's claims lacked evidence. It's interesting, given that we now have video proof of you employing strikingly similar language and strategies. Justice Williams turned the page. Number 12 of the complaint, 2012. Honor student Jamal Washington, 17, said that you put narcotics in his backpack after he wouldn't give you details about his elder brother. Once more, the complaint was deemed unfounded by your department. With every new revelation, Martinez's breathing became increasingly difficult. 23rd complaint, 2016. Michael Johnson, MMD. Indeed, renowned cardiologist Dr. Johnson claimed that you detained him outside his own house because you didn't think a black man could reside in that area. Before his lawyer could obtain his release, Dr. Johnson was detained for 6 hours. She gave Martinez a direct glance. Officer Martinez, what was the department's conclusion regarding that complaint? I don't. It was difficult to hear Martinez's voice. Judge Williams answered on his behalf, without evidence. Are you starting to notice a trend here? Margaret Carter, The chief judge had crept into the courtroom and was now seated in the front row, taking notes with a somber expression. "Officer Martinez, here's what's truly intriguing. After comparing your complaint history with your arrest data, I noticed some intriguing trends." Judge Williams produced a sizable chart and set it up on an easel for public viewing. "You have made 1,000 arrests over your 15-year tenure. Those of color were engaged in 1,089 of those arrests, or 87% of the total. On the other hand, your patrol area's demographics are 27% black, 31% Hispanic, and 42% white." She used a laser pointer to indicate various areas of the chart. "Even more intriguing is the fact that, according to your use of force records, you utilized physical force in 63% of your arrests of individuals of color, while just 12% of your arrests of white suspects." Martinez's lawyer was working furiously, most likely in preparation for an insanity defense. Judge Williams went on, "And here's maybe the most damning statistic of all. Of your 1,089 arrests of persons of color, 432 cases were dropped for constitutional rights breaches, prosecutorial misconduct, or a lack of evidence. That's around 40% of dismissals." She looked back at Martinez. "Do you know what we call it, Officer Martinez, when 40% of police officers are fired for constitutional violations? We refer to it as a criminal pattern." The only sound in the courtroom was the scratch of reporters' pens on paper. Judge Williams continued, "But wait, there's more," in a tone that was now almost conversational. "I've also looked at how your career affects this county's taxpayers financially." She produced an additional document. "This county has paid out $2.3 million in settlements and judgments pertaining to your behavior during the last 15 years. Officer Martinez, $2.3 million is more than the whole yearly budget of several small towns." At last, Martinez managed to speak, although it sounded like a croak. "I was merely carrying out my duties, Your Honor." Judge Williams interjected, "Your job. Let me read you the oath you swore when joining the police force, Officer Martinez." She took out a formal document and read it out loud. "To the best of my ability, I sincerely pledge myself to uphold and defend the constitutions of the United States and the states, to act with sincere faith and loyalty to them, and to carry out my official duties in a fair and impartial manner." She put the paper down. "Faithfully and impartially, Officer Martinez, without bias, without regard to skin color, and without bias." Judge Williams addressed the entire courtroom as he circled the bench once more. "The actions of a single corrupt officer are not what we are witnessing now. This is the natural outcome of a system that shields officers like Martinez, pays settlement after settlement, and ignores complaint after complaint, all the while permitting the abuse to go on." She looked back at Martinez. "But, Officer Martinez, didn't that system let you down today? Because you decided to attack someone who could have revealed everything today." Martinez lowered his head into his palms. "You told this court this morning, Officer Martinez, that individuals like me must understand our position. I believe it's time for you to discover yours." Judge Williams raised her gavel and went back to her bench. "Officer Martinez, you are in a defendant's chair and will be subject to the full repercussions of your 15 years of criminal activity. You're going to stay right there." Just like the gavel fell down with finality, with her judicial robes flowing around her like armor made of justice itself, Judge Williams stood behind her bench. As she readied herself to deliver what everyone knew would be a landmark verdict, the crowded courtroom held its collective breath. "Officer Martinez," she said, her voice laden with centuries of legal precedent, "in addition to you, I want to address everyone in this courtroom and everyone who will hear about what transpired here today before I make a decision in this case." She pointed to the gallery, which was crowded with attorneys, court employees, reporters, and bystanders who had heard rumors of the unusual events. It started this morning with a straightforward query. What occurs when a person wearing a badge thinks they are exempt from the law? What happens when someone believes they can attack a federal judge and get away with it because of years of unbridled power and systemic protection? Martinez was slouched in his chair, watching his life and career fall apart in front of him. Officer Martinez, the solution is currently in front of you. On the day she took her oath of office, Judge Williams picked up her gavel, the same one that had been engraved with the words, "Justice is blind." But she sees all. You have harassed this town for 15 years. You have been violating the constitutional rights of people whose only offense was being black or brown for 15 years. You have denigrated the insignia you were sworn to uphold for 15 years. As she went on, her voice became more powerful and impassioned. However, Officer Martinez, it wasn't a single violent act that was your biggest error. Your biggest error was assuming that no matter how far you went or how many lives you destroyed, the system would always keep you safe. Martinez's eyes were crimson and defeated when he finally looked up. You believed you were establishing your authority over yet another helpless victim this morning when you shoved me against the wall of my own courthouse, called me a dirty animal, and told me I should be kept in a cage. You also chained me and carried me through these hallways like a criminal. Everyone in the crowded courtroom had to strain to hear Judge Williams as she leaned forward and spoke in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper. However, neither I nor any of the victims you have abused throughout the years were helpless. Officer Martinez, the one distinction is that justice at last has a witness today. She stood up straight and tall. Officer Martinez, I find you guilty of first-degree assault, a felony, based on the evidence that was shown in this courtroom and that came from your own words, your own actions, and your own camera. The courtroom was rocked by the statements. I convict you of assault on a judicial officer, a federal offense that has a 5-year mandatory minimum penalty. Martinez's lawyer placed his head in his hands and closed his eyes. Deprivation of civil rights under cover of law is a federal felony that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison, and I find you guilty of it. Martinez appeared to sink deeper into his chair with every statement, and since you gave false testimony under oath in this same courtroom, I find you guilty of first-degree perjury. Judge Williams took a moment to let the gravity of those accusations to descend upon the chamber. But it was never truly about you, Officer Martinez. You are just a sign of a much more serious illness that has afflicted our legal system for far too long. Turning, she spoke to the crowded gallery. We have permitted police officers to act without consequence for far too long. We have paid settlements, disregarded evidence, and rejected accusations for far too long while letting the abuse go on. We have been telling victims of police brutality for far too long that justice isn't for them, that their experiences are unimportant, and that their words don't count. She spoke passionately, but that is over for today. The events that transpired in this courtroom today demonstrate that no one is above the law, not even politicians, police officers, prosecutors, judges, or anybody else. Martinez's body trembled with cries that reverberated around the quiet courtroom as he abruptly broke down. I apologize, he muttered. I apologize. I never meant to do that, and I didn't know. There may have been sympathy in Judge Williams' eyes as he stared down at him. Your apologies, Officer Martinez, comes 15 years and 47 complaints too late. The only reason your regret is showing up now is because you were finally apprehended by someone who could hold you responsible. High over her head, she raised her gavel. However, this is what I want you to know. Everyone you abused throughout the years deserved the same justice I'm giving tonight. In your last moments as a free man, You should be held responsible for the actions of every doctor you arrested for residing in the wrong neighborhood, every grandma you called a derogatory name, and every youngster you gave drugs to. The gavel was in mid-air. I'm doing more than just providing justice for myself today. For everyone whose concerns were rejected as unfounded, I'm bringing justice. For every family that witnessed their loved one being brutalized while the system turned a blind eye, I'm bringing justice. Her words reverberated throughout the courtroom. You told me to know my place this morning, Officer Martinez. All right. Let me explain where I am. It's my job to make sure that bullies like you can never again kill innocent people while wearing a badge. The sound of the gavel falling was like a thunderclap. Officer Martinez, you have been given the harshest punishment permitted under law. You will be imprisoned in a federal prison for 25 years without the chance of release. Martinez lost all control of his sobs and fell to the ground. Judge Williams added, I am also directing a federal investigation into all of the cases you have handled, all of the arrests you have made, and all of the complaints that have been made against you. It's finally time for the victims you have kept silent for 15 years to get their day in court. Putting her gavel down, she gazed out over the crowded courtroom. Let this serve as a warning to any police officer, prosecutor or official who believes they can misuse their position of authority without facing repercussions. Despite her blindness, justice sees everything. Then she comes for everyone at last. 5 whole minutes of applause erupted around the courtroom. At last, justice had been done. The repercussions of that momentous event continued to change the whole legal system 6 months later. His fellow inmates at the federal prison where Officer Martinez was serving a 25-year sentence had heard about his misdeeds via the media. He lost his freedom, his pension, and his badge, now spending his days in protective custody. The man who had previously tormented a whole neighborhood suddenly knew what it was like to be helpless. However, Martinez's demise was only the start. A network of corruption that extended far into the command hierarchy of the police department was discovered by the federal investigation that Judge Williams authorized. 4 supervisors were charged with crimes, and 12 officers were fired. The federal government took control of the entire department. New procedures requiring automatic federal examination of any case involving claims of police misconduct against judges were instituted by Chief Judge Margaret Carter. All officers were now required to wear body cams, with backup systems that were impenetrable. Most significantly, Martinez's tainted 432 cases were reopened. Numerous defendants who had been unfairly convicted were freed from jail. Hundreds more had their sentences shortened or their charges withdrawn. Martinez's victims received an additional $8.7 million in compensation from the county, which was funded entirely by the police department's budget. Judge Williams herself rose to prominence as a national icon of bravery and integrity in the judiciary. She was asked to give speeches at law schools all across the nation, and each time she told the tale of how a violent incident exposed decades of institutionalized abuse. Her message remained consistent. While justice delivered is justice for everyone, justice postponed is justice denied. In her honor, the courtroom where it all took place was dubbed the Justice Williams Federal Courthouse, with a straightforward inscription. A bronze plaque close to the entryway honors the morning that changed everything, and is where justice at last found its voice. However, the neighborhood itself saw possibly the most significant transformation. Community monitoring boards were established, and people who had been afraid to expose police misbehavior for years started to come forward. Judge Williams personally created courses on unconscious prejudice and constitutional rights, significantly revamping police training programs. Motivated by Judge Williams, Bravery, the young law clerk who had observed the hearings that day, chose to focus on civil rights law. She currently fights similar challenges in courtrooms across the country as a member of the American Civil Liberties Union. The cops who had encouraged Martinez's lies, Rodriguez and Thompson, were fired and charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice at the federal level. Their videotaped laughter as they witnessed the abuse of a federal judge was used as proof of institutional corruption in a case study that was taught at police schools across the country. With over 50 million views, the video of Judge Williams rendering her decision became the most viewed courtroom video in internet history. People who had suffered similar abuses but had never witnessed accountability presented so fully, so openly, and so flawlessly began to leave comments from all over the world. Officer Martinez is sitting in his prison cell today, most likely reflecting on the time he decided to attack a woman because he believed she was helpless. He believed he understood his role in the world. He believed that he knew hers. On both, he was mistaken. Because justice isn't always simply a blindfold. Justice occasionally dons judicial robes, justice occasionally comes with a gavel, and justice can strike back when the time is perfect. Never undervalue the importance of confronting bullies. If you think that everyone deserves justice, regardless of their identity or appearance, share this story. If you want to witness more inspiring tales of bravery, overcoming corruption, hit the I like button. And please subscribe, because everyone should be able to watch justice stories like this one, which occur on a daily basis. It might be your tale next. Truth always manages to get through.